Hello, I am MsTedy, and I would like to officially welcome you to our first episode of the Mining Conversation with MsTedy podcast. And the podcast is exactly about that, having conversation about the mining industry in South Africa. I am going to be sitting and talking or having a conversation with key players in the mining industry, with mining specialists and analysts who will then share their knowledge about the mining industry. The topics that we are going to be covering, we are going to be touching on the environmental issues, history of mining. We're also going to be looking at what is currently happening in the mining industry currently, and also speak about women in mining and many more. So I would then ask that you subscribe, like, share, and always make sure that you do not miss an episode in order for you to stay informed. And before I introduce my guest, I would like to give thanks to our sponsor, which is a mining company called MENA. And with that being said, I would like to then thank Mr. David Van Wyk for joining me today to have this mining conversation. So today I am joined by my guest, Mr. David Van Wyk, who is the lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation, and he's also a mining analyst. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Van Wyk.
Thank you very much for having us. It's a great privilege to be here.
Wonderful. So to start off our conversation, we're going to go back in time where how the mining started in South Africa. Can you kindly take us back to how, just a summary of how the mining industry started in South Africa?
Okay, very quickly. Mining has always been a part of South African history for a very long period of time. Even before colonialism and industrial mining took place in various Iron Age communities throughout Southern Africa, including in South Africa. In 1866 to 1874, they discovered diamonds in the area of Kimberley, and you had a diamond rush in that particular area, and eventually you had a consolidation of mining away from the diggers that were there towards more monopolistic forms of mining when De Beers was established as a company that took control over the mining in Kimberley. In 1886, gold was discovered, or the first mining license for gold mining was issued in the Transvaal Republic to George Harrison in the area of Langlaagte. Very soon, the mining became very concentrated and monopolistic in that particular area as well, as deep-level mining required lots of capital, lots of labor, and lots of investment, which bucket and spade operators could not do. Because there was a high requirement of labor due to the fact that there were no industries, iron and steel industries in South Africa, labor was brought in from labor sending areas in Mozambique, in Zimbabwe, in Swaziland, and in Lesotho and the Eastern Cape. This was essentially black labor. By that time, the legislation was already pretty racial in nature, in that black people were excluded from owning mines and could only actually come to the mines as laborers, as cheap laborers, in fact. And the profitability of the mines was determined by the fact that cheap labor was available in abundance. But it also gave rise to the foundation of South Africa as a racial capitalist state, or as a racial economy, an economy in which black people were assigned the position of cheap labor, and the white settler population became the owners of mines and so on.
So, Mr. Van Wyk, if I may ask regarding what policies were there that also ensured that the mining industry succeeds, if I can put it that way, or it grows to the current state? Can you kindly take us through the policies that were used to govern or legislate the mining industry during those times?
Okay, the relations of production around mining were very complex and complicated. As I've already said, there was a racial division of labor that took place,
Yes.
and various laws were passed by Cecil John Rhodes, such as the Gray Act and various tax laws and so on, to prevent black ownership of mines, but ensure that there was an abundant supply of cheap labor. Also,
Mhm.
because the mining was deep level mining, it required lots of investment from overseas, and so legislation and so on that was passed to ensure that that kind of investment, especially from Britain, could come into the country to facilitate mining. There were conflicts, political conflicts around the control of mining areas between the Free State government and the Transvaal government and the Cape Colonial government. And this resulted in the First Anglo-Boer War. And then after that, there were also problems with regard to labor that came from Britain, which was very militant and socialistic
Yes.
in nature. And that led to the formation of a white mine workers trade union that resulted in a mine workers strike in 1921, in which the slogan was "Workers of the World Unite for a White South Africa." Thereafter, in the 1922 elections, laws were passed, such as the Colour Bar Act, to ensure that skilled labor was reserved for white workers in the mines. Black workers became organized into trade unions in the form of the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union, which covered the labor sending areas as well of Mozambique, of Zimbabwe, of Zambia, Lesotho, and so on. And this eventually led to the formation of the South African Congress of Trade Unions, which led a major strike in mining. The Mine Workers Union of South Africa, the Black Mine Workers Union of South Africa in 1946, which was the biggest strike in South Africa's history up to that particular point. After that, the 1948 election saw the National Party coming to power, and it entrenched apartheid and the spatial division of land and of labor in the country to entrench the cheap labor system for the mining industry. And you had a situation whereby black people were removed from what was considered white areas. They called it the removal of black spots between 1955 and 1965. And you saw the formation of major townships such as Soweto, and the townships all around the country where you had mining, Tabong in Welkom and so on, places like Reger Park in Boksburg and so on,
Yes.
that saw people divided along racial lines where the mines are. This of course had environmental consequences because the black townships were usually located in close proximity to mine waste, such as
Yes.
the tailings facilities of mines all along the northern edge of Soweto. You know, if you go to Meadowlands, if you go to Diepkloof, if you go to Tulani in Soweto, you will see the mine dumps all along the northern side and the eastern side, northwestern side of Soweto. Um, Eventually, as gold mining went into decline, which is the situation that we find ourselves in now, where we've got 2,000 abandoned mines in the country,
Yes.
these mine waste facilities became a problem for the residential areas, the townships that were allocated to black people. And so you have these mine dumps that are full of uranium, they're full of arsenic, they're full of lead, they're full of copper, iron, and so on, and other heavy metals that are very detrimental to people's health. And so that poses a real big problem. And as industrial scale mining has gone into decline, we are also having the problem of retrenched mine workers not having acquired any skills outside of mining, remaining behind in areas where they used to work and becoming what we call illegal miners or zamazamas.
Yes.
You know, thousands of people basically form informal settlements or squatter camps in the mine site on the East Rand, all along Main Reef Road, right through Durban, Roodepoort, Deep Village on the West Rand, and extracting what gold remains in these abandoned mine sites. Deep level mining is no longer possible because the depth of the gold is too deep. The water levels in the mines too high, and it's too expensive to get at the remaining gold. But there is still, you know, the crumbs of mining on the surface. which is what the Zamazamas are going after, and in the more shallow tunnels from the shafts that are existing at the moment. And unless we actually regulate small-scale mining, which I think the Department of Mineral Resources is trying to do at the moment, having passed legislation that would make artisanal mining legal, there is an attempt to legalize small-scale mining and artisanal mining and to make it more orderly, because at the moment it's very disorderly, and it creates conflicts between communities and the artisanal miners themselves, and of course the criminal syndicates that are exploiting the artisanal miners and taking the gold from them and getting the gold into the formal system by illegal means. So in the Gauteng area, you probably have around 34,000 small-scale artisanal, what we would call illegal miners. And the process of legalizing and regulating this part of mining is now underway.
So, Mr. Van Wyk, yes, pertaining to the illegal mining and the abandoned mines, you do mention that the Department of Minerals and Energy does have a plan or is in process of coming up with solutions just to minimize that. I just want to get to an issue where we just understand, because previously on your interviews, you mentioned illegal mining also as ghost miners. Can you kindly explain how ghost miners work and what is that concept of ghost mining?
You see, the problem with mining at the moment is because it's in very steep decline. The controls that mines have around their perimeters and also the interlinking of underground tunnels and so on allows for a situation where you can have workers going down, also with the issue of labor broking and subcontracting. A lot of the mine work these days is subcontracted to subcontractors, and when workers go down in the skips that take them down underground, it is not always possible to know who is going down with them, and so you have in the area of Machabeng, Welkom, and so on, and also on the West Rand, also on the East Rand, you have where you have got formal licensed mines having the problem of having ghost workers. These are workers that are going underground parallel to the unionized normal workers that you do find underground and extracting gold. Sometimes they stay underground between 3 and 6 months at a time before they come up again. And they operate alongside the formal mining operation that is there, plundering the gold. In Blyvoor Eitzig mine on the West Rand, for example, you had a situation where mine managers were involved in sending down workers underground, and they actually operated a processing plant next to the mine on a farm, illegally processing the gold from the company that they were working for and using these ghost workers underground. The ghost workers get recruited by labor brokers and so on in places like Lesotho, and they are told that they are coming to work in formal mines in South Africa. When they get to South Africa, they actually find themselves doing illegal work underground as ghost workers. And when this becomes apparent and the police and so on become involved and people get killed in the process, that is when the subcontractors and so on pretend that they don't know who these workers are. That became apparent about 3 years ago in the Klerksdorp area, where about 21 mine workers were killed and their bodies were left next to the road. And when the widows came from Lesotho, the widows actually said, but our husbands were there recruited by labor brokers to come to these mines. So there's a big criminal element taking place in mining as industrial mining is in steep decline at the moment. And so we are having a problem of having to regulate the issue of ghost workers, which is highly illegal, highly syndicalized operations. And I think that aspect deals with mine security and how to secure access to the mines and entry to and from the mines, which is something that needs an investigation in its own right, and also solutions in its own right. But, as I say, we are moving away from large-scale industrial mining. All the big
Yes.
industrial mining companies are leaving the country, and we are moving now towards medium and small-scale mining, which is something that we need to control very carefully to avoid chaos.
So do you think with the government calling in the police, soldiers to curb the illegal mining issue, is that the right solution, or what is it that the government actually needs to do?
Well, I think that the solution is more complex than militarizing the problem. I don't think that it's necessarily a policing problem. One of the problems is that when mine workers get retrenched, they should be able to get access to their pensions and their disability funds, and also to their unemployment benefit funds, which at the moment is very difficult. You're required to have cell phones and computers and fax machines and things like that. And in rural villages in Mozambique or in Lesotho and so on, or the Eastern Cape, people don't have access to these things. So very often they can't access the funds that are being managed by fund managers who make money out of interest of these funds. And so there's no motivation for the fund managers to actually efficiently pay out these funds that accrue to mine workers. And I think that the unions should do more to actually protect their former employees who are now retrenched and so on from this exploitation, if I may call it that, because it creates a big problem for South Africa, but it also creates a problem for Lesotho and Mozambique and so on. The other thing that needs to be done is the government needs to assist Mozambique and Lesotho to create conditions, employment conditions and economic opportunities in those countries. When these workers come back, there is something for them to do there. Otherwise, they will simply return to South Africa and then become involved in illegal mining.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Van Wyk. So let's just go to the future, because you've also on your interview spoken about a bleak future for mining in South Africa. So with me being Tediso and hearing that there's a mine that still has about 10 years to operate, or there's a new mine that has not even started to operate, and it says the lifespan is 50 years. To me, it sounds like mining does have the future, but you on your interviews mentioned that South Africa needs to move away from mining and look at other industries that can contribute to the economy of South Africa. So how do you then explain to a person who's like me, who does not understand how mining works, that when I hear you saying, or when I hear that a mining company is about to open and has a 50-year lifespan, and to me it sounds like that is a good lifespan, and it will contribute to employment and the GDP and so how does that then work with mining lifespan, and you saying that mining future is bleak in South Africa?
Well, I think that the reason why the mining future is bleak in South Africa, first of all, I explained the problems with getting at the gold that is underground.
Yes.
And then the second problem, of course, is with platinum. The demand for platinum has collapsed since the introduction of electric motor vehicle engines, because more than 80% of platinum is used to manufacture catalyzers for petrol-driven engines and combustion engines. And so when the demand for platinum has fallen, the price of platinum hasn't recovered since 2009, and many platinum mine shafts are closing down and big companies are moving out. Anglo American is selling its mines in the Rustenburg area, and lots of Impala shafts and so on have closed down. These are all the big producers of platinum. Now, the problem is that new mines and new mining licenses generally are for very short lifespans, 10, 15-year lifespans. In the 1950s, a mine had a lifespan of more than 100 years. And very often now, while the mining company claims that the mine has a lifespan of 50 years, in actual fact, once it starts operating, and we find this a lot in Limpopo, for example, within 5 or 10 years, that same mine shuts down. and then it's disrupted the lives of people in the area where it operated. It's taken their land, it's polluted the water, it's polluted the air, it's covered the agricultural land with mine waste and so on. And then within 10 years, that mine goes, and the community sits with land that is now useless, and with jobs that were never actually realized. So the tragedy for me about South Africa is that we are a very mineral rich country, but we've never used the minerals to our advantage. We've always allowed foreign mining companies to take the minerals out of the country, to take the minerals to Europe, to take the minerals to North America, to take the minerals to China and to India, where they are manufacturing motor cars, they are manufacturing electronic goods, they are manufacturing the goods that are required for the transition away from fossil fuels to alternative energy and so on, which are all things that we could have been manufacturing in South Africa if we retained control of our minerals. For example, with manganese, we've got probably more than 90% of the world's manganese in this country, but we are just railroading it out to the harbors on the coast away from ourselves, and not actually using that manganese to have a just transition in energy inside this country, for example.
Yes.
However, if we look at the dying towns, Welkom is dying, Klerksdorp is dying, Stilfontein is dying, Brakpan is dying. These towns are all former mining towns, and they don't need to die. We can actually convert the mines that are there to do other things, to do other economic things that are necessary for the future of this country. For example, each mine had an electricity substation that fed electricity to the mine from the Eskom grid. That substation can be reversed to feed electricity back into the national grid if you use the mine site itself to generate alternative energy. For example, you can use the wasted land for solar farms. You can use the ultra deep level mines to create gravitational energy, or to create geothermal energy, because mines are very hot underneath, and you can run turbines from the heat that is there in the mine to generate energy. But what we are seeing, unfortunately, is people plundering these electricity substations, stealing the copper and so on from them, and therefore destroying the capacity of that site to become an alternative energy site away from the old mining site that it was before. If you look at Soweto, for example, all the northern edge of Soweto is surrounded by old mining sites. Now, if you remove all the asbestos roofs from Diepkloof, and about 50 to 60% of all the roofs in Diepkloof are still asbestos roofs, you can turn Soweto into a solar farm. And each household can then generate electricity, which it sells back into the national grid, generating an income for that household, and by doing so, creating a situation of economic development within that household, because kids will have access to free electricity, while selling electricity in the household can then create the position for creating small industries in households in the Soweto area, for example.
Yes.
People who fix cars at night, people who do electronics, people can do all kinds of things in those households if they had access to affordable electricity. Welkom, for example, owes Eskom more than 5 billion rands in electricity arrears. If you change Tabong into a solar farm, Welkom can be selling electricity back to Eskom instead of paying electricity to Eskom. Welkom cannot pay its electricity bills because of the high level of unemployment in that community. And if you can generate an income for that community from selling electricity, you can make Welkom a viable town as well. The mines in Welkom are also full of gas. Okay, you heard about the gas explosion about a year ago in which
Yes.
Now, you can actually convert those mines into gas production without having to start new wells for gas. You can actually just extract the gas from the Harmony mine operations in that particular area, or the Sibanya mines in that particular area, and Welkom can become a center for gas production. moving away from producing gold and silver and uranium like it did in the past, it can now convert these mines into something useful, and you can actually rescue Welkom from dying. There's so much that can be done, but it would require that we do an audit of all the mining towns and find out what is in those mining towns that can be used by the local government in those towns to the benefit of those towns and to the economic gain of those particular towns. But it would require that we are, creative and that we think outside of the box. We can't just always think about mining because minerals are not renewable. You cannot
Okay.
plant gold and new gold will come up. You have to accept that at some point the minerals will come to an end. And if you didn't use those minerals in the first instance to develop your country for a post-mining economy, then you
Yes.
are going to be in trouble. You are just going to be like the DRC, or you're just going to be like various parts, the copper belt in Zambia and so on, which are very badly environmentally destroyed. There are parts of South Africa that are very badly environmentally destroyed already, and our water sources, our air quality, and so on have been impacted. And so we really have to think about what are we going to do in this economy beyond mining, because we've got to feed people, we've got to house people, we've got to provide people with water and electricity and so on. How can we use what we've got already to our benefit instead of just allowing it to be exploited and sent out of the country?
Wonderful, Mr. Van Wyk. Just to close off our conversation today, can you kindly give us your top solutions that will make the mining industry better? I say this because we know that mining is still contributing about 8% of the South African GDP. So what solutions do you think are there, or you can advise the government and the Department of Mineral and Energy to use in order to make the mining industry better?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to ask, why is mining only contributing 8% to GDP when 40% of exports is mine-related and about 40% of imports are mine-related? How come the GDP contribution is so small? And the reason for that is that we are not actually controlling the mineral flow out of our country effectively. We're also not controlling the cash flow. Most of the profits from our mining is realized in London, is realized in Switzerland, is realized in Belgium, is realized in the Northern Hemisphere, instead of being realized here. The mining value chain actually benefits those countries more than it does us. We create more jobs in Britain than what we create in South Africa from mining, for example. And so we need to address those particular issues. The other thing that in other words, we need greater control. We need greater management, better political management of the mining industry in this particular country. But I also think at the moment, mines contribute to social and labor plans. And so in the Rustenburg area, you would find 5 or 6 mining companies all competing with one another over social and labor plans. Instead of combining the funds of those social and labor plans and in a planned way, create economies that will take Rustenburg, for example, beyond mining. In other words, we are not actually effectively managing the resources that come out of mining in the form of money that is invested in social and labor plans in a coordinated manner. And we need to coordinate mining better from a central point to ensure that we understand that mining is not going to last forever, and that we need to use the resources that come out of mining for a post-mining economy.
Mr. Van Wyk, thank you so much for having the conversation with me today. Truly, you did open and shared your knowledge so that our eyes are more open into the mining industry. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful. So that was Mr. Van Wyk, who spoke to us about mining history. And he also touched on the current state of mining in South Africa. And he closed off our conversation by giving us solutions on what we can do to make mining better in South Africa. With that being said, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. And I would like to remind you that please do like, share, subscribe to our podcast. And I'd also like to thank our team, my team, which is Kamuhelo Malangavi, who's the content producer, Tapelo and Musa, who are the technical producer. And I'd also like to thank Minar, who is currently our sponsor. Thank you so much. Until next time.